So with that, I think my speaker from Sydney is the next person who will be providing some information. His name is John McGee, and he's from the Safety Department of Master Builders, New South Wales, and he will provide a brief overview of the COVID-19 guidelines. His team has been reviewing the New South Wales public health orders, researching the World Health Organisation online courses and making notes, receiving input from each of the safety departments, safety officers, culminating in a broad overview of COVID controls and how to apply them to a work site. The Master Builders Association COVID-19 guidelines are regarded as some of the most contemporary, easy to implement controls available. So I'm just making sure that John's there now, and
yes, I'm here.
Oh, good, excellent. Hello, John. So you ready to go now, John?
Well, as ready as I can be, yes.
Good. Off you go.
Yes, unfortunately they couldn't get anybody that was better looking than me, so you're stuck with me this afternoon. So when it comes to COVID, I've actually held a webinar for our members for the Master Builders in New South Wales not long ago on this subject matter. And a lot of our members sort of struggled a little bit because they weren't sure what they had to do, how they had to go about it and meet their legal obligations. So what the Master Builders New South Wales did was they produced a guideline for our members that they could go to the Master Builders website, log into and download to provide them with adequate guidelines as to how to meet their legal obligations. So give me 2 secs, I'll just bring up, I'm not that tech savvy, but I'm just going to bring up the document that we provided to our members. And I should be able to bring that to full screen. Can everybody see that? Yes. Is that coming up on the screen?
Yes.
So basically what we had to do was try to guide the members as to what their legal obligations were under the model legislation that all the states and territories adopted from Safe Work Australia, and to make them aware that they had to provide a safe working environment, but also to ensure they're meeting their legal obligations as a person conducting a business on an undertaking. So a lot of it, when the COVID situation first arose and businesses were closing down, or construction work was basically given an exemption to continue. So a lot of our members weren't quite sure what was legal, what wasn't, and how they had to go about it. So they had to be aware that they had to adopt this COVID-19 guidelines from the Health Department and Safe Work New South Wales. And you'd be similar down in Tasmania because you work from the same model legislation. So they had to try to implement COVID-19 requirements where reasonably practicable. And basically they had to do and implement safety management plans to do with COVID to try and implement for construction workers, but subcontractors coming to the construction site to be able to continue doing business. So I'll just go to that. So what they sort of implemented a lot of the construction sites, and in my role as the safety officer with the Master Builders, I spend part of my time out on the construction site, residential and large commercial projects in Sydney CBD. And basically as their first stop, they sent out all the information to the subcontractors to pass on to the workers so they were aware that when they came to site that there would be screening requirements on the project. And what a lot of the companies have done now, and the construction companies or principal contractors have done, they've put into place a screening process. So it's a two-part process that when workers arrive, they're screened. Most of the sites are actually using temperature thermometers to test workers when they first arrive, but also what they're requiring a lot of the subcontractors to also do is complete a daily assessment sheet for all their workers. It's basically a disclosure document to say they haven't been to any hotspots, they haven't been in contact with anybody that's got COVID-19, or they haven't been overseas and recently returned and should be isolated. So once they get past that process and disclose that information, whether it be on a daily basis or even at induction stage when they arrive on construction sites, then they're required to comply with social distancing requirements. But that's where reasonably practicable, because in some situations where workers have to work in close proximity to each other and they've got certain scope of works or work activities require them to work in close proximity to each other, then that's not always practicable. So where they've mainly got the social distancing requirements in place is mainly to do with open areas and where workers are sharing common areas such as facilities for toilets or ablution blocks, lunchrooms and drinking facilities. So a lot of the large commercial sites, they've tended to try and stagger the rest breaks for a lot of the workers, and where they have the luxury to do so, they also allocate specific lunchrooms to specific subcontractors or trades. So at least if they were to get a situation where somebody might start to show symptoms or they've been exposed to a COVID situation, then they can actually narrow down exactly which areas they were in. But when it comes to social distancing, they do have all the tables marked out as to two workers per table. Where they have the luxury of lower level car parks, they've brought in additional tables and chairs to allow the workers to spread out. And what a lot of the site management are doing, they're carrying out ongoing monitoring of the facilities to make sure the workers are actually complying, because they're getting a lot of situations where the workers are actually becoming too comfortable with the working environment and they become complacent. So they're trying to keep them honest and catching them out where they're all sitting near each other or sitting at the same table and basically having a bromance. And they're quickly reminded to separate, and what they've been doing, they're issuing compliance notices where the court bloke's not doing the right thing. The only other places they struggle with social distancing is with the multi-storey high-rises in the CBD, where they're using personnel hoists. They have put strict guidelines and requirements in place in the hoist where it's restricted numbers in the hoist. So that's creating a bit of a situation, transporting workers from up to and low, bringing down on the upper and lower levels. But they are doing quite well with that, actually, I've noticed. So I'll give credit where it's due. But the only other place they've struggled a little bit with social distancing is when they're using elevated work platforms and knuckle booms and those sort of things where workers are in a tight space in a cage area where they've got to attach your harnesses and cherry pickers, and they're required to work in close proximity and do beam holding or lift. So unfortunately, there's not a lot they can do in that situation. The other thing they've also done is, moving on to social distancing, is they've been very strict about workplace hygiene. So basically, from the point of entry to most construction sites now, they've got all the sterilisation bottles placed at point of entry, at the site offices, at all the lunchroom areas and the toilet blocks, ablution blocks. They've got sanitisation stations, pump stations. They encourage all the workers to regularly clean their hands as much as possible, wash their hands. And when it comes to drink stations or bubblers, they've actually provided plastic disposable cups, and they've instructed the workers to use the cups when having a drink, not to use the bubbler directly. And when I'm on construction sites, I actually notice that a lot of workers are actually complying. It's just the odd occasion you'll get workers that become a little complacent and tend to forget. So they're trying to keep them honest by the monitoring situation with site management. So most of the sites I've been to, they've got posters up everywhere to reinforce the social distancing and hygiene requirements as to what they require and ongoing hygiene. And also a lot of the sites, they've brought in full-time cleaners. So they're constantly cleaning surfaces, handles, toilets, work surfaces, tables, chairs. So they have actually been quite diligent when it comes to that, a lot of the principal contractors in providing that. I suppose you could say it's almost like forensic cleaning protocols in place. So they've been quite good with that. And a lot of the workers have cooperated, and if a lot of the workers or any workers think that they're showing any sort of symptoms, they are ringing in and disclosing that information as required and keeping away from construction sites so they don't spread any contaminants. When it comes to consultation, it's especially under the Work Health and Safety Act to do with duty to consult and share relevant information. A lot of the stakeholders between the principal contractors and the subcontractors are sharing relevant information, but just not subcontractors, but also consultants. So a lot of the consultants that are required to come to the construction sites, they're also inducted through the same process as the workers to make them aware what the site requirements are when it comes to COVID-19 and the hygiene requirements and the social distancing requirements. And some of the sites have actually tried to get consultants to come to the site where possible, outside of working hours when a lot of construction workers are on site to try to minimise contact with other people. Same with delivery drivers, they're trying to keep the deliveries staggered and coordinated, but also the drivers themselves keep a distance where possible. So because they're going to multiple sites, they're trying to get them to keep with their vehicle rather than enter the site in any manner or form to avoid cross-contamination. So when it comes to consultation, all the subcontractors are required to not only through the toolbox talks and pre-start meetings with the principal contractor, the subcontractors are also required to consult with their own workers in regard to their duty of disclosure and duty to consult, but they're also, that's why they're required to complete that separate COVID-19 form with their workers when they're having their own toolbox talk and provide that disclosure information back to the principal contractor to verify it's been done. So on a whole, I go a lot of commercial sites and not so much a lot of residential, but a lot of them are actually taking it on board. The only other situation when it comes to consultation and meeting legal obligations was regarding travel. So where necessary, a lot of the workers that felt they might be showing symptoms, whether COVID-19 or just general ill health in general, a lot of them have been staying home and ringing in to say they thought it was a bit of a risk to come to work. And any that have been to hotspots or been in contact with anybody that did have COVID-19. There hasn't been too many on construction sites that I've been made aware of, but where required, they have done the right thing and notified and kept the employer in the loop and the principal contractors as well. The only other one that came a bit of a concern was for a lot of employers is because the construction workers, especially in country areas where they might have to travel long distances to and from their construction sites, they were a bit concerned because a lot of the construction workers actually, they carpool. So they were a little concerned about being in close proximity in the same car, but according to the Department of Health, that workers who were required to travel together long distances in the same vehicle, especially work vehicles, they were exempt to do with social distancing requirements because it's something they have to do, and it's quite a large expense and inconvenience to a lot of small operators. But where possible, they did stagger the workers and spread them out or encourage the workers to try to take their own vehicles if possible. So we did have a little bit of a concern as to that grey area to begin with, but that's all been nutted out now when it came to consultation with the Health Department and also Safe Work New South Wales, and also government ministers who approved the COVID-19 requirements. So that's all the information that we've passed on to our members, and we've tried to target our responses to our members when they ring in and try to verify as to what they're required to do with the COVID stuff. But we've also encouraged members where possible to try and speak to the Department of Health directly, but also just not the Department of Health, but the state regulators such as Safe Work New South Wales, and speak to them and seek guidance as well. And I would say it would be the same down in Tasmania, that businesses are all encouraged to contact the state regulator as well and seek guidance to make sure they're meeting their legal obligations. So that's pretty well all the guidance information we've sent out to our members, and we do encourage them where possible to ring into our office and seek guidance, but also where not everybody always sort of believes everything you say or they're still not sure. I encourage them that when it comes to safety or anything regarding COVID, that the state regulator also, the main function is to provide guidance where necessary. So we do encourage them to also speak to Safe Work New South Wales. It'd be the same, as I said, down in Tasmania, to make sure they're meeting their legal obligations. So that's about all I can really give you as to what the information is that was provided to our members and what advice we've been giving them when they ring into our office and seek information regarding COVID-19. So at that point, that's all our guidance information. I'll take that off, stop share. Does anybody have any questions or queries or anything I've spoken about they would like to clarify or they're not sure about? I'm assuming everybody can still hear me.
Yes. No
First sign of madness when you talk to yourself. So.
Anybody like to make any comment of what they've seen in terms of COVID at their workplaces, or?
Yeah, most, as I mentioned through the presentation on our guidelines, most companies have been pretty good.
Mm. And of course, here in Tasmania, we've had less risk than on the mainland through the sort of measures that the government has taken. So, but of course, every little bit counts, and just raising the awareness and letting people know what sort of approaches have been taken across Australia is a good thing, just to keep that up, because we're hoping, of course, that we move very safely through to when the vaccine arrives, but until then we still have to ensure that all the measures are taken, just like we are here.
Yeah, I think just the biggest danger on a lot of construction sites is just complacency and workers tending to forget or taking things for granted, and principal contractors have just got to be aware, as the control of the site, they've got to ensure compliance and make sure they have ongoing monitoring and their COVID management plans are in place and they're being implemented and workers are actually complying with it.
Okay. No other comments or thoughts? No? Well, thank you very much, John, and particularly so because you were happy to stand in for David, who unfortunately injured his back on Friday night. So we thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for the information. Thank you. Thanks for your time, everybody. Much appreciated. And thanks for working the technology. Well done. I did well.